Alrighty, so let's do, another lesson based around the MTF phases, medium time frame phases. Gonna get sick of me saying it, but it is probably the most important part of being able to nail the strategy is really understanding the medium time frame phases, right? Because that is what helps us to use somewhat of a systematic framework to understand what is a high probable or medium to high probable area to enter the market. Right, we build all of our trade ideas on our medium time frame, and those are the medium time frame POIs where we trade those ideas. Okay, so the medium time frame determines the direction in which we want to trade, and once we've identified that direction, we then look for the medium time frame POIs, these blue boxes, to then trade that idea. Right, once price mitigates those medium time frame POIs, it's only then do we then drop down to the lower time frame to look for our entry models, okay? So with this diagram, we're going to go through all of the sort of phases and the areas where these colored circles are, so like red, green, and orange. They are the areas in which we get a POI mitigation that I'm going to talk about. And of course, that's when you would then drop down to your lower time frame to then look for your entry model of choice, okay? So obviously red being low probability, orange being medium, green being high, right? It's not an exact science, but it's... The whole idea for this isn't to cover every single possible scenario that could arise in the market. The idea behind this is as we go through, you need to understand kind of the general logic of why we view something to be kind of medium, low, or high probability. And then with time, it will make sense in your head. I don't want to keep saying words. Let's just kind of dive into it and we'll go through it piece by piece. And yeah, just watch this as many times as you need. So really, this kind of box up to the left-hand side. Now, if you can't see any of the text, because it might be a bit too small on the video, I obviously will put a high-quality screenshot of this exact chart beneath in the notes, so make sure you click into that, and you can zoom in, and it should be very, very clear, okay? And I'll put the text below the video as well. So really, first things first, I mean, this whole diagram, I primarily have made it for us to discuss when to use the LC-1 entry model, right? Where we use lower time frame lid as a strong liquidation into our POI. The first thing to say really about that is when you're looking to trade in the market, I mean, around 80% of those scenarios, you should really be waiting for the LC2A entry model. Okay, that's kind of the way I approach it. The majority of the times, that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for that fake break liquidation to form in the immediate price action, right within the POI. Those are how my textbook high probability positions look like. Okay, so that should be your main entry model. And then think of LC1 as like almost a little bit of a bonus. It's a little extra tool in your arsenal to pull out in specific scenarios to help you get involved where the LC2A entry model may not set up. Generally, when that happens, it's when we have a very tight and small MTF range, right? You guys who have experienced will know that. Sometimes we get these quite big, large swing ranges like this. So then when price pulls back, you get like multiple internal ranges. We get like a lot of structure, and then eventually we get that bearish IBOS. And it's like, if these ranges here are quite small, trying to shorten here, for example, this is kind of the perfect scenario of when I start to think about, yeah, it's okay to look for LC1 now. Okay. So yeah, we're only really going to think about using LC1 when we're in those high probability, or at least the higher end of medium scenarios. Okay. And really the thing that needs to be kind of the criteria every time is that it's a tight/small medium time frame range. Now, mechanically defining what is a tight or small medium time frame range is quite hard to do. That's something, again, you're going to have to use a little bit of discretion with and build experience with over time. But a bit of a tip that I could kind of think of is that when you get, say, like your mitigation, so imagine we're here, right, and price comes into your POI, and you go, right, I want to trade from this medium time frame POI here, right? And then you get the mitigation, so then you drop down to your lower time frame to look for an entry model. And then you ask yourself, well, is this small enough, this internal range here, this medium time frame internal range? You're asking yourself, is this small enough to look for an LC1, or is it too big? Well, this here is a bit of a tip you can say and go, right, well, when we get my mitigation and I drop down to my lower time frame, let's say that's the M5, can I see the M5 lid to the left here? Okay, because obviously what you're going to be using is, or maybe even this, or wherever it is, wherever lid you're using, kind of when you're looking for like the entry candle here, can you also see the lid that has been liquidated to the left without having to zoom out? right? Like the price action should almost be all together quite near. It's not an exact mechanical rule, but just to kind of give you a rough indication. Because sometimes what I think will happen is, say, like you're trading this POI up here, right? And it's quite a big, large swing range. We get our POI mitigation. Then you drop down to your lower time frame and you're looking for like a fake break liquidation here. And you think, okay, can I use LC-1? And then you look all the way to the left here. All right, I'm just going to move these lines. And maybe you're using like a lower time frame high here, or maybe there's another one here or whatever. Like whatever one was the nearest one to the POI mitigation. It's like, then you ask yourself, well, should I use LC-1 here? My advice is no, because this is just way too far away. You're going to have to zoom out if you're looking at your lower time frame to see both the entry candle and this. To have them both fitting on your screen, you probably have to scroll out quite a fair bit. So that's a good rule to kind of know, a good rule of thumb of like, yeah, this is probably too far away for it to be relevant for this LC-1 entry model. Okay. Generally, you want it to be nice and tight like this. So if you can't see like that, just wait for the fake break, right? So that's a kind of super crucial, really key part to that will help you to filter out the majority of times where you shouldn't be using LC-1. This is kind of another thing. Again, not a mechanical rule that it has to be this necessarily, but based on my testing and whatever, like these are the best times in order to not just take LC-1, but all of the entry models in general. These are the best. It's the start of phase A and C. In more simple terms, always trading pro internal trend on your medium time frame, and like the first initial phase of that. So when we get that first initial bullish IBOS here, this is that first initial phase C, right? Bang, bang, right? We want to get that initial phase, which I'll talk about in more depth in a minute. And then likewise, the start of phase A, here we get that initial bearish IBOS, shorts are now pro swing and pro internal. This is those high probable times to get involved. So what I would actually say to the majority of you, especially when first using this entry model, is actually, yeah, do make this a very strict rule and only consider it with phase A and C. And you may even want to do that for your entire plan, right? Until you start to kind of get a bit more experience, because trading the other phases, B and D, and A2, they are a bit trickier, particularly ranges as well, right? I want to stay out of those. So just kind of another general rule of thumb, like use LC-1 in scenarios when you would consider taking, a medium time frame risk entry, right? So, this start of phase C, initial IBOS, big risk reward on our side. There's only kind of one or two POIs to pick from. Sometimes that's when, I'm literally just going to set my limit order here on the M15 or the medium time frame. I'm not going to bother waiting for an entry model. I just want to get involved. Risk reward is still great. Like, it's just high probability. They don't happen every week. They don't even always happen every month. I mean, you're probably going to get at least one of these every month, to be fair. But when I see them, high conviction, bang, I want to get involved. Like, that's when you kind of want to be thinking LC-1. Really refined, high probable scenarios. Okay? And then obviously doing it on a high probability medium time frame POI. So what makes a high probability POI? Well, building the narrative with the phases is probably the biggest step to getting that right first. If you're doing the right phases, i.e. start of phase A and C, you're already well on your way to probably getting a high probable POI. Okay? But obviously the other things that we've spoken about through the course, something like an unmitigated extreme. Okay, so when we get that bearish IBOS and prices pulling back, right, this supply zone is going to be the unmitigated extreme of that level, right? It's the highest supply zone that's, unmitigated. That's going to be a high probable POI. Is it a sweep flip? Okay, so sometimes like this POI here, it reacted from this supply. So we flipped it, broke structure, it swept liquidity, right? That's going to be a high probable POI, especially when you combine it with phase C. It's part of a demand chain, etc., etc. Like, even if that wasn't the unmitigated extreme, like imagine there was actually like a pivot candle down here behind it, I would still view this as a high probable POI, right? Because it's a very clear big flip reaction, clear sweep liquidity, nice impulse momentum. Clearly that's where the demand came in that led to the IBOS, start of phase C. Like, that's high probable. Even if there's maybe like an unmitigated pivot behind, I'm still willing to get involved on this sort of thing. Okay. And yeah, if it's got some lid, even better. If it's part of that supply and demand chain, like we're saying, and you want it to be well priced within the swing range and within the internal range, right? Try and tick as many pieces of positive confluence in your favor as possible. So, in more simple terms, do you have high conviction that the POI you are looking at will hold? Is that trend, internal or swing, is going to continue? Okay. So I think a lot of you, especially if you have a little bit of experience, you will know those times where price action is just developing and you just know you have confidence. You have high conviction in what you're seeing. The directional bias is clear. The POI is very, very clear. You're not umming and ahhing. Is it going to go this way? Is it going to go that way? What POI do I pick from? It's a little bit messy. It only broke a little bit of that structure. It's not really that. I mean, if you're kind of squinting at price action and you're not sure, don't even be thinking about LC-1. LC1 is when you're like, right, super clean, you have confidence. You know what I mean, right? When you have that feeling, that's when you want to think about LC1, okay? So that's kind of the more general points out of the way, but this can be something useful to sort of think about or, you know, put into an initial trade plan. So let's go through the phases in a little bit more detail. So your medium time frame swing structure is bearish, right? This is like a medium time frame swing pullback, and then we get that medium time frame boss to the downside. Now, as we know, when the internal structure is still bearish, after that bearish boss, if we were looking for shorts within here, we classify these as phase A2, right? This is a very tricky phase to master because, as we know, after a swing break of structure, at any point, that swing pullback can kick in, right? And we're trying to short from here, thinking that the internal trend is going to continue. We don't have a much risk reward on our side. We never know when the swing pullback is about to kick in. That's why phase A2 is very, very tricky. And again, you should only use it in very specific scenarios. Ideally, when like it's here, there's no key level to the left nearby, momentum's very strong. But even then, it's hard to know if it's going to keep going. Now, this is kind of an obvious scenario I've drawn here of when we definitely shouldn't be thinking about phase A2 shorts. And that's when we're coming off a higher time frame demand mitigation. Okay, so this grey box being, say, higher time frame demand. Like, obviously, we don't want to keep trying to force these shorts because, yeah, they can continue, but we know over a large sample size, is it really worth it? I'm going to say no. Okay. Also, what do we have here? We have a strong liquidation. So we can see like a little bit of an M15 fake break. Maybe there's like an M15 chock. That low then gets liquidated. Maybe there's some nice big obvious equal lows as well. We get that liquidation. Price is putting back up. Yes, the internal and the swing trend is still bearish at this point. But come on, you have to start building a picture, right? We're coming off higher time frame demand. We've had a medium time frame strong liquidation. There's a lot more evidence now to suggest that we're potentially about to get that pullback, right? This is the time to be patient. Even if this plays out, don't get FOMO. It's probably not worth it in the long run, and you'll find that in your backtesting if you kind of backtest these trades, okay? So you can read these in a bit more depth. I would say keep it out of your plan. Like I said, stick to phases A and C. So this is phase A2. Phase A is over here, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so that's a nice, easy one, in my opinion, to stay away from. And there will be times, yes, when the market literally just trends and trends and trends, and it can be a little bit frustrating if you're not involved. But you'll see, again, don't take my word for it. Find it in your own testing. See if you have success with A2. But I would say, for the most part, it's not too worth it. Okay. Okay, cool. So we get the strong liquidation. We'll get the hard time frame mitigation. Now we get the bullish IBOS. So now if we're looking for longs are pro medium time frame internal structure, right? Because the internal structure shifted bullish. Yes, we're counter swing, but we're pro internal. So for me, phase C is high probability, medium to high probability in most scenarios. Okay. Which is again why I'm saying just focus on phase A and C for this, but particularly the start of phase A and C, right? When you get that first initial IBOS and it's like a really convincing IBOS, nice strong liquidation, hard time frame mitigation, all those things are going to make it better. But if you've got a clear bullish IBOS and prices coming in, this is when I really love it. This is one of my favorite phases. I want to get involved here. Okay. So this is a good time to be thinking about LC1. But again, it's not just because it's start of phase C. You want to be taking into consideration all of these other things. I would say the next, or probably one of the most important parts of this is that it is a tight and small range. Okay. Like, for instance, this is a large swing range. So by the time price is up here, like any lower time frame lid down here, this is way too far away. Whereas when we're working with this internal range here, this bullish internal range, and the trade idea is to play a continuation of that next internal leg, this is not always, but a lot of times going to be quite a tight range. This is when I can think about using LC1. So let's say we've got like this POI here. Okay, I'll be happy to look for LC1 from here. Obviously, it's not drawn on this chart, on this example, but we can use lower time frame lid. So although there's no lid on the medium time frame here because it's one straight push, when price is coming back, if you look left on a lower time frame, obviously for LC1, you'll need a lower time frame low within here, right? A little like N5 low or whatever your lower time frame is. So then if you draw your strong liquidation point across, right, that can be your LC1 entry. I'm happy to take in this occasion. High probable POI. It's a sweet flip, led to the IBOS. Ideally, it has like a demand mitigation. And again, like I said, sometimes you might get like a little, unmitigated pivot extreme. But generally, if this is like a very obvious, nice pullback flip, something quite convincing, maybe the bottom of the flip like mitigated the demand range, like a little bit of sell to buy range down here. All these times, it gives me high conviction to get involved. Because especially at the start of a new phase, it doesn't always pull back to the extreme. So I'm happy to get more of that decisional kind of POI here. You know, momentum strong. If you look left here, there's no opposing key levels, right? You guys will see these types of trades. I'll show you some more examples in the future videos as well. Like that's when I just want to get involved. I'm almost looking for an excuse to get involved. That's the type of mentality you want to have if you're thinking about LC-1, okay? And there's more stuff more in here, right? High time frame demand mitigation, MTF strong liquidation, bullish IBOS to the upside. Very likely, now that swing pullback is starting, we might be wrong. Sometimes you'll get it wrong. We'll get the IBOS, we'll get involved. We're too early, we go down, and then the real move happens. So be it. When I take losses in those scenarios, I literally don't care. Okay? Yeah, tight MTF range, well priced, pretty much no cause for lower prices, okay? They're the sort of scenarios we want. Now, if we start to, I haven't drawn it on here, but imagine we start to kind of get continued bullish internal ranges from within here, you can consider, let me just kind of draw it a bit better, like say here, we get another bullish IBOS and there's another demand here. Of course, you don't have to only take the very, very first phase, but this is going to be the most ideal scenario. You can consider taking LC1 here, but it's already becoming more, medium to lower probability because we're getting more into the premium of the range. The internal ranges are less well respected here. Sometimes it can sweep, then go, or whatever. So again, you need to judge that as you get more experience. Like every scenario is different. How are we in the premium? How near are we to a supply range? Is there a high here that price maybe is sweeping, so therefore we may get a deeper pullback before we go higher? Like all of these things you'll need with experience. So generally this is the best, but it's not to say that you couldn't consider something here, right? I can't cover every single possible scenario in one diagram, right? So this is why you guys need to use a little bit of common sense. And it's more about understanding the logic rather than trying to memorize this like an exact scientific journal, right? Do you know what I mean? It's getting the general idea, understanding the logic and theory behind what we're doing, and then using your own common sense to know, when and when not to consider to get involved. You don't have to master this overnight, but these are kind of, I think you guys get it, right? This is the stuff that's going to take a little while to really get concrete in your mind. But this framework, when applied to every type of scenario in the market, will help you massively. Okay, so I think you kind of get that. Start at phase C is great. Now we're obviously up into the premium and we're starting to come up into these decent levels of supply. So definitely want to stop thinking about taking longs, and our focus now wants to be on taking shorts. So if we were to take a short at this scenario, this is going to be pro swing trend, right? Because the swing is bearish, but it's going to be counter internal because this was the last bullish boss. So if we're shorting against that, it's counter internal, right? So if you refer to your MTF phases cheat sheet, this is phase B. Phase B, for me, rarely high probable because you're trading against the internal trend, right? Which is why I say here, pretty much we always want to be trading pro-internal for it to be high probability. That's my favorite a lot of the times, right? So not to say you can never trade these, but I would say only if you're going to do it, try until you're consistent, try and only do this with like LC2A. Don't bother with LC1 for the most part, okay? Especially when we've got a big range like this, right? These are the more immediate internal ranges, and then you're trying to short here and you're using some like little lower time frame lid within here. That's, a far way away. Like when we get the POI mitigation, you're dropping down to your lower time frame, you're looking left and you have to scroll out really, really far. Like that's not a good time to be doing it. You're probably going to take a lot of losses most of the time. Okay. And that's what I've said in here. Counter MTF terminal and momentum, it's a large swing range, so don't use any of the lower time frame lid within here all the way from the left. It's never really going to be a high probable scenario to consider LC1. There are cause for higher prices behind, right? Liquidity behind this high, but more importantly, we've got the unmitigated high time frame and medium time frame supply. Just, don't let it get involved. I mean, even better, wait for an MTF chock. I haven't drawn it here, but technically that would give you a new POI. Okay, maybe you could consider LC1 within there, but again, it's still not the best. Whereas this here is still phase B because this is again pro swing but counter internal. But why is this a little bit higher probable? Why is this a bit better than this, even though they're both phase B? Well, for a few reasons. Probably the main one is that we've now come into the unmitigated extreme supply of the swing range. So this is the supply that needs to hold if the MTF swing range is going to continue bearish, right? If the swing trend is going to continue, this is a good POI. Now, just because it's the unmitigated extreme doesn't mean you should always take these trades, because there's going to be times where you're going to see there's going to be a lot of evidence to suggest that we're probably going to switch bullish, right? So it doesn't mean just blindly get involved just because, in theory, this has to hold for the swing trend to continue, right? But anyway, the reason why it's better is because one, we have this POI, so it's a good POI. Two, we've taken some lid, right, for this level. Doesn't mean we need to trade it as an entry, but it's a good confluence for this POI to hold. And really, they're the main reasons, to be honest with you. So it doesn't necessarily make it hyperbole, but it makes it better than this one. Okay. And also, that was the other one. We've got a strong liquidation here, right? With the fake break, strong liquidation of the MTF fake break and the lid, right? Just more confluence stack in your favor. So consider it, but it's still a little bit more advanced. Now, when we get all of that, and then we get the bearish IBOS confirming that this is holding, right? We're really starting to build a big narrative, and I go through all of this here. This is now phase A. So shorts are pro swing and pro internal. We have full alignment. Very, very, very strong signal that this swing pullback is now over. And now we can look to follow those bearish internal ranges to target this low. Okay, strong liquidation, extreme mitigation, bearish IBOS. This is like this here and this here. These are my favorite trades when you can get them when they line up. You're not going to have 100% strike rate, but when this happens, I'm getting aggressive to try and get involved. Again, particularly when it is a tight and small range, right? In this case, it hits the unmitigated extreme of this internal leg. You know, there could be lid. There's so many different ways it could be better, but this is the general area I'm looking to get involved. I'm happy to consider LC-1. Again, we get another bearish IBOS. So this is pretty much the same as here. It's not quite as well priced, but it's still well within the premium, right? It's like first kind of initial phase. Sometimes you get kind of 2 or 3 initial tight phases and then it kind of goes sometimes. If you can get that, I'm happy to get involved. Obviously, we've got lids here as well. And again, there could be like a POI here. Yeah, perhaps I'd look to get involved here as well. Obviously, this is going to be the better one because there's an unmitigated level behind, right? I can't cover every single possible scenario, but this is the general way to think about it. Okay, you know, this level here, if we look left, we're not coming off a significant level of demand where we could potentially expect like some shenanigans, right? There's plenty of risk to reward to the downside. Now, when we get down here, yes, technically you could be looking at phase A all the way down here. But you have to understand that as we start to come into these lows down here, even though we expect this swing low to now get broken, it doesn't mean price is just going to come down and take it. Sometimes it will, but then a lot of times you'll see there's going to be a bit of demand down here and we'll start bouncing around a bit. We'll start chopping, and then eventually we go. Right, we can chop around during Asia or whatever, or into the weekend. So trading down here is not well priced. It's lower probability, which is why we want to get aggressive up here. We're not worried about taking losses up here. This is the time to take losses on shorts. This is the time to not worry about taking losses on longs. Okay, these are the times to just think about I don't want to get FOMO, I'll let it go without me or whatever. Okay, and obviously phase D, I would just say 95% of you just don't even have phase D in your plan. This is a particularly not a great time to trade phase D, which would be buying counter swing and counter internal. Why? Because the objective is already complete. We've already pulled back up, so now we're expecting this low to go, right? Not a good time to be doing phase D. At best, you could play a bit of an internal pullback before we go, but okay, you might want to do that, but do not be using LC-1 for that. Especially this is probably going to be quite a big distance. Like the distance between here and here is going to be quite big. You don't just want to be using like some little lower time frame, liquidation of a little lower time frame low down here, trying to buy against all of this. It might work here and there, but what's the point? Are you going to risk, 100 grand on that trade idea? Why do I say 100 grand? Well, I'm trying to get you to think big, think about what you want to be trading in 3, 5, 10 years time. If you're not going to be doing this for the long term, then why are you bothering putting yourself through all of this, right? You need to be thinking big and thinking, is that what a professional was going to risk their capital on just for a quick move because, they've seen their favorite Instagram trader take 3 trades that day, right? Get that crap out of your head. Get very clear in your plan what phases you are going to be disciplined to execute on and start off with a very, very rigid trade plan. As you earn the right to have a bit more discretion in your plan and to be a bit more loose, then you can, do that. Be a bit more loose and have a bit more discretion. I would say at the start, it's almost better to be kind of almost overly rigid, just so you can practice the art of being disciplined, right? You're not going in with that, I just need to have the perfect trade plan to pass phases and make a ton of money. No, it's about giving yourself strict rules to understand how to be patient, what to look for, how to build accurate data, building that experience, building that psychological experience, earning the right to know when and when not you can bend your rules. You can't do that at the start. You need to be more rigid. For those of you who get more experience with it, then okay, yeah, there are some times where phase B makes sense. There are some times where I might get aggressive with a phase D. I do now have experience to know when to take phase A too, right? You got to earn the right for that. So hopefully this, I guess you could call it a cheat sheet, is going to help you. It's very, very, it's based on all the same principles of all of the medium time frame phases lessons I've done and throughout the LC2A stuff. In the previous trade plan module, this too. It's just, I'm just going to keep going over it. I think I'm just going to make endless content on this until it's drilled deeply into your guys' subconscious because it really, really is super important. But even more important with LC1, because it is a very, very aggressive entry model, particularly if you were going to use it with lower time frame lid. Yeah, I've kind of made myself as clear as I possibly can with this. So watch this again and again, save down this sheet, and yeah, I'll try and create as many real life examples to put the theory into practice to really drive the point home. But you've just got to be careful trading this entry model, because this entry model in the wrong hands, it can lead to all sorts of problems, okay?